Since our beginning in 1989, Liberty Counsel has created a family of ministries that include law, policy, education, evangelism, discipleship, prayer, humanitarian relief, missions, and printing. Each ministry is independently supported and has a distinct mission. Liberty Counsel, our flagship ministry, is one of the nation's premier legal organizations, advancing religious freedom, life, and family in the courts. Liberty Counsel Action, our 501c4 ministry, works in the nation's capital, in the states, and on the local level, advancing public policy. Faith and Liberty brings the gospel to Washington, D.C. through prayer, Bible studies, Christian fellowship, and pastoral care. Covenant Journey Discipleship for students that lasts for generations. Covenant Journey Travel, a life-changing experience for travelers of all ages in the lands of the Bible. Covenant Journey Academy, a full-service K-12 online Christian academy available to families and around the world 24/7, 365, with more than 150 courses, all taught by certified teachers. Christians in Defense of Israel is an education and advocacy organization that supports Israel and the Jewish people. Liberty Relief International provides humanitarian aid and spiritual support to the suffering and persecuted Christians worldwide, offering food, shelter, medical care, and hope. Liberty Prayer Network is an international prayer and intercessory ministry. Mobilize provides a platform for missionaries to raise support for a wide variety of missions. New Revolution provides creative communication and printing services. Liberty Counsel is a movement whose various ministries are changing the course of history by transforming lives and creating precedent that lasts for generations. Learn more and get involved now at lc.org.
I'm so delighted that you've joined us across your Christian television network, and I'm thrilled to be able to sit down with the co-founder of the Liberty Counsel because his wife helped him. I'd like to welcome in studio Mat Staver. It's a privilege and honor to have you here, Matt.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you.
Well, the viewers just got a sneak peek of all the different facets highlighted of what you are doing, and you are living out contending for the faith and occupying till Jesus comes. I know it takes a team effort to do that, and especially on the scale that you're doing it. But when you started this, did you ever envision what you're doing today? Did you realize you would be impacting culture the way you are?
No, not really. I mean, I knew I wanted to impact culture, but not in the extent that Liberty Counsel has grown and been able to impact the culture. A lot of this is something that God just brought to Liberty Counsel over the years. My wife and I, Anita, she's also an attorney, president, and general counsel of Liberty Counsel, founded Liberty Counsel in 1989. And our focus was religious freedom and the sanctity of human life. We later very quickly added the third pillar, which is defending God's design for marriage and the family. And Liberty Counsel at its core represents people all over the United States, churches, people of faith, religious organizations, advancing religious freedom, the sanctity of human life, God's design for marriage and family. And we do that primarily through litigation, but also through education and through public policy. And over the years, with our work, God has brought different ministries to us. We've either birthed ministries that are now operating as part of various aspects of Liberty Counsel family ministries, or some ministries were gifted to Liberty Counsel. And so you see Liberty Counsel has 11 other ministries, and one of them is actually older than Liberty Counsel, believe it or not, and that's Liberty Counsel Action. That goes back to 1986.
Wow.
And we named it Liberty Counsel Action. Its original name was the Liberty Alliance, and it was the continuation of the Moral Majority. It was actually originally incorporated by Dr. Jerry Falwell,
wow,
one of the key founders of the Moral Majority in 1979. That was very instrumental in the election of Ronald Reagan. And so the Moral Majority then ceased in 1986 in that same time frame, and the Liberty Alliance was created to continue the Moral Majority and expand it. Over time, Dr. Falwell gifted that ministry, and his son gifted that ministry to Liberty Counsel, and we renamed it Liberty Counsel Action, and John Stemberger now is our president of that 501c4. So that does public policy. We do it all over the country, but certainly have a major presence in Washington, D.C. on a regular basis. Liberty Counsel Action works in the courts, and then a lot of our other ministries work in a wide variety of areas, including Covenant Journey Academy, which is our K-12 online Christian educational resource, and that's available 24/7, 365 all over the world.
That's tremendous, an online academy for kindergarten and 12th grade, so kids don't have to be indoctrinated anymore, right?
That's right. And we have Faith and Liberty. This is a ministry that started in the early 1990s in Washington, D.C., and we wanted to have a discipleship and evangelistic ministry in the nation's capital. We had Liberty Counsel for law, Liberty Counsel Action for policy and legislation. We wanted to have something that was more focused on discipleship, and that's Liberty Counsel's ministry, and it's called now Faith and Liberty. And that's a very unique ministry that has a very specific ministry to the nation's capital of all three branches of government. And it shares the gospel, engages in Bible studies. We have Bible studies there virtually every day of the week throughout the entire year for young people that work in Washington, D.C., for members of Congress. We have the congressional prayer reading where members of Congress read the Bible.
Yeah.
The Bible reading marathon, that's a 90 hours of reading the Bible from Genesis through Revelation nonstop. We have the live nativity with real animals, camels and others, right there that we take in front of the United States Supreme Court. So it's an amazing, very, very unique ministry in Washington, D.C.
Well, I just thank you and your wife for answering the call to do what you are doing in this season and in this hour, to see it all, culminating for such a time as this. The light shines in the darkness, and you're a bright light, you and your team. Talk about, you were on the forefront, if you will, when the vaccine mandate came out. What did you experience? You helped a lot of churches and ministries to not have to shut their doors, even though they were being mandated to do so. Tell us why, and what did you learn through the process? And I also have a follow-up question related to some of these vaccines.
Well, in March of 2020, 5 years ago plus, when this happened, everyone was wondering what this is about. There was a lot of propaganda, there was a lot of fear, and we prayed about what direction we should go. And when they started locking down churches but allowing abortion clinics to have free operation in big box stores, that was like it was the week before Christmas, because they were free to operate, it just hit us that it wasn't right, and we prayed for God's direction. We knew that this was unconstitutional, and so we began to represent churches. We got pushback, some from our own supporters. Some supporters left us, but many other supporters, joined us, and many of those supporters that questioned whether we were doing the right thing, they've returned. But we litigated, and we won on behalf of churches, and we went to different churches all over the country. We selected different circuit courts of appeal, and we took our first case win to the United States Supreme Court. We had a case that went there before, but our 5-4 win was in December of 2020 on behalf of Harvest Rock Church out of California and Harvest Rock Ministries. And then the lower courts didn't abide by the Supreme Court's decision, believe it or not. So we had to go all the way back up again on a second round, and then we won 6-3 in February of 2021. That ultimately brought to end the lockdowns in the worst offending state in the nation, which is California. But one of the things that we found when it began with the churches is how easy Christians were willing to give up their freedom and to just simply say, we can have church on our electronic device. Not thinking about, not everybody has electronic devices, or if they do, they don't have high-speed internet. Or even if they had high-speed internet and they were able to watch a sermon on an iPad or a cell phone or TV, there's something more about church than just watching a sermon. There's the fellowship, there's the counseling, there's the baptism, there's the laying on of hands, there's the prayer. There's more to it than just watching, and there's that community factor that's very important. But that's surprising how quickly people were willing to give up their freedom, and how quickly some of the judges, frankly, were willing to accept a false narrative by the government, particularly the CDC, and then give up the constitutional freedom and protection that we have. But, we continued to press forward, and we prevailed. And then once we prevailed over those lockdowns on churches and places of worship, it even got worse. And that's when the mandates came with regards to the military in August of 2021, and then other healthcare workers, and then people all over the country. And we had between 35 and 40,000 people fill out our page online for help. And some of those people represented 10, 20, 200, 400 people in their place of employment. So we had thousands and thousands and thousands of people that we worked with. And so we developed our network of affiliate attorneys to help us. And I think one of the most rewarding aspects and one of the most eye-opening aspects was working with healthcare workers, but particularly working with the defenders of our freedom, those in the military. Some really amazing, godly people in the United States military, but also some real bad corruption from the highest levels in the Biden administration, also from the Secretary of Defense and at the highest level of command within the military, how they would pressure these individuals who literally gave their lives. And some of them came back from foreign countries with friends that didn't return with them, or friends that returned with only part of their bodies, and they were willing to lay down their lives. Some of them were Purple Heart recipients. They were willing to sacrifice everything for our freedom, and then our government turned against them and would not recognize their religious freedom. By God's grace, however, we met some amazing people, and we won decisively over and over and over again, and got class action injunctions to protect the defenders of our freedom. So that was probably one of the most moving moments in my life and also in the life of our staff, because it was so intense and we met so many amazing people that were willing to stand for their faith. And those that did stand for their faith, they were rewarded. But I remember when people would come in the office, the phones would ring. They didn't stop ringing. All of our phones, we had to have other people answer phones that didn't normally answer phones. And from the morning until the evening, when we would shut the phones down and put them on voice message, they rang constantly, constantly. You'd walk through the building. They were constantly ringing.
Wow.
These were people calling in. And then when we'd come in the next morning, there would be several hundred voicemail messages that people had to listen to. And then we developed these telephone conferences for individuals at different times of the day and night, including one just for the military. We had people from around the world that were stationed all over the world in the military calling in. And it was just really a family helping others and strengthening them in their religious convictions in their walk.
Man, thank God for that. You know, Liberty Counsel was there, and thank you to those of you that support this great work. Again, they can give as they purpose in their heart, safe and securely, at the website information on the screen, because it helps you do what you're called to do.
That's right. I mean, Liberty Counsel is a 501c3. Contributions are tax deductible, and without people's contributions, we wouldn't have been able to help those that we do help or have helped in the past.
That's right. It takes, we always say every dollar is a destiny. It takes money to do ministry, and so whatever you purpose in your heart to do, I know that Christian Television Network believes in a biblical worldview and always has. And one of the things that I realized when I was, looking at your website, one of the things that I found was about the vaccines. A lot of people don't know what some of the formulas are derived from, like, for example, chicken pox. Can you expound on that?
Well, when we got into the COVID vaccine issue, or the COVID shots, there were two different kinds of objections that people had. One, they didn't want to have an experimental mRNA shot into their body that would harm their body because it's the temple of God. So it was a general opposition to COVID in general. But also there was this opposition because none of them, all of them were made in their development or production phase with aborted fetal cell lines. And so from a pro-life standpoint, you didn't want to have anything that had any association with abortion. Well, we originally got involved in religious exemptions for vaccines in the early 2000s out of a case in New York. And that's when we began to have an eye-opening experience, because there's a lot of vaccines. Chickenpox is one. Normal chickenpox vaccines or measles or mumps vaccines. In fact, there's no alternative to a measles vaccine that does not have an association with aborted fetal cell lines. So we have a list of all the different aborted fetal cell lines that they have used in all these vaccines that many people know or many people may have received. And you may not realize that they're associated with aborted fetal cells. There are some vaccines that have an alternative. So if you get a vaccine, you can find out, is there an alternative that's not made with aborted fetal cells? But unfortunately, there's a whole list of them that have no alternative. Every one of them are made with this aborted fetal cell lines. So it's an amazing history that we discovered and we litigated, won our very first case out of New York. We also had people that, once we started doing the litigation, that would tell us stories about how their son or daughter was fine, and they got a series of MMR, measles, mumps, and the various kinds of rubella, and there's also pertussis type of vaccines that go along with some of these, DPT and so forth. So some of those vaccines are combined together. So MMR is 3 vaccines in one, and they will not give you the independent vaccines separate. They bundle them all together. They know that when they bundle them, it causes more risk than if they did them at single doses and if they did it later in life rather than early. But the protocol and the pressure is do them all together and do them young. Well, we've had many individuals that said, my child was fine, and then right after the vaccine happened, they've noticed a significant difference and they have autism or something else. And so obviously RFK is really pursuing some of that issue, and I'm glad it's a time to do it. But there's a big, you think about it from a pharmaceutical standpoint. In 1986, the pharmaceutical companies, they threatened to not make vaccines because there were people getting injured from a certain vaccine back in the 1980s. So they went to Congress and they said, we're not going to make vaccines anymore unless you give us legal protection. So the Congress passed, and Ronald Reagan signed a law that protects vaccine manufacturers or distributors from liability. Now, if they make a drug like OxyContin or something else and it causes injury, you can file a lawsuit, and there's a lot of class actions that stop some of these harmful drugs. There's no legal immunity. But if they make a vaccine, called it a vaccine, you can't sue them. They're legally immune. So it's a gold mine for pharmaceutical companies. They can make these vaccines. They have no downside because no legal responsibility for death or injury. And then they go and lobby the different states, and guess what they do? They add to the required vaccine list for your childhood vaccines another vaccine. And now, for example, all the kids in your state, because of their lobbying on the state level, have to get that vaccine, and they have no downside immunity because they're protected from litigation. So it's a real problem. If you go back, for example, in 1986, autism rates were about 1 in 10,000. Then what happened is they had legal immunity. Autism rates started to climb. Now autism rates in the United States are 1 in 30, I believe, or so. And it's higher, for example, in California, which has a very strong push on vaccines. So those states that have these strong pushes on vaccines, the autism rate is actually higher. The pharmaceutical companies have tried to deny that link, but I think there's indisputable evidence that there are significant harms with vaccines, and people just need to do their research and make their own independent decisions.
Amen. Well, again, I want to encourage you to go to the information on your screen, go to the website, and be informed. People perish for the lack of knowledge. That information's right there on the screen, and you can get a whole lot of information at lc.org. Talk about, if you will, the role of the church in this hour. As you look at the spiritual climate in America, generally speaking, what are you seeing, and what can the church do to be engaged in the culture?
Well, the good news is, and this is even coming out from Barna and some of the research and other polls like the Pew research that just came out, and that is there is a resurgency of individuals who are young people accepting Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior who have no background in Christianity. So there's a hunger that's happening in this younger generation. They're seeking purpose and meaning, and they're finding it in a relationship with Jesus Christ. So that's the good news. On the other hand, with regards to the churches, we need to, Anita, my wife, she had a dream in January of 2020. This was before COVID really hit in terms of the lockdowns. And her dream was that people had attended a place of entertainment, but they had not attended church.
Yeah.
Then COVID hit, and you realized that was true. People were fine with the entertainment, but didn't understand what church was about. And church needs to be transformative. Our pastors need to be bold and be able to speak truth on a wide variety of issues. Don't shy away from things like abortion. Pastors might say, I'm not going to talk about abortion, it's controversial. There may be people in my congregation who've had an abortion. Exactly, that's right. You need to talk about it. Because if you don't, you are dooming people to make that horrible mistake. Number one, there are people who have had an abortion. They need to have the forgiveness and healing of Jesus Christ. You need to address that in a compassionate way. Number two, there are people who may be thinking about it, or it may come on their radar later, and if you don't address it, guess who's going to address it with them? The wrong crowd. So speak the truth. And right now, for example, we live in an amazing situation with some of the executive orders that President Donald Trump is doing, so many amazing things. And what we need to do is have two things. We need to have the church involved to transform the culture and the thinking so that abortion, for example, becomes unthinkable, and that abortion also from a policy standpoint becomes not permissible. But we have to have a culture that makes it unthinkable. And where does that begin? The transformation of the heart. And that happens with churches and church leadership in the community.
Right.
We have an opportunity to have transformation that will last for generations, but we have a short window to do it. If we don't codify some of these important policies, if we don't change the thinking of the community, then we might have some temporary wins now, but it'll be worse if we don't act during this window of opportunity, because something worse could happen, leadership can change, and that leadership can become very vindictive against people of faith.
Yeah, I think now more than ever, we have to stand up and be counted, and like the Word of God says, occupy till Jesus comes. Talk about when someone says, well, I don't want to talk about these social moral issues because these are political issues, but they're really social moral issues. What do you say to somebody that says that? And then, more importantly, someone will use a lot of times in the faith-based arena, pastoral leadership, I've heard them say many times, well, my 501c3, talk about that.
Yeah, let me talk about the last one first. The 501c3 issue is a myth. You're not going to lose your tax-exempt status. That came into being in the 1954 with the so-called Johnson Amendment. But not one church has ever lost its tax-exempt status for endorsing or opposing a candidate for political office, let alone talking about policy issues that are not for or against a candidate running for office.
That's right.
You can talk about and should talk about all kinds of things that candidates discuss, debate, that's going on in our community. That's one of the things that really was a change in my life. I was a pastor. I knew a lot about the Bible. I knew the biblical languages, but I didn't know about one of the most important things that was going on in my backyard, and that is the slaughter of innocent children. And it was in 1983 I watched a documentary called Assignment Life, and it showed a first trimester abortion. And I was ashamed. How can I have so much knowledge about the Bible, but I drive by these abortion clinics and they're killing children? I had no knowledge about it. And so that drove me to the intersection between our Christian faith, law, and policy, and how our Christian faith must speak to and transform and impact our law and policy around us. So we can't be silent.
That's right.
You know, when we report to our Lord, and he said, why don't you say something in defense of my children who are being abused and slaughtered? Well, you know, I might want to keep my tax-exempt status. No, that's not going to be a good excuse, and it's a false excuse anyway.
That's right.
Well, I may have had some people that were big donors in my church, and they may not like it. Well, so what?
God's your source, isn't he?
Yeah, we need to follow the Lord, and we
Yeah.
need to not only read the scriptures, but we need to understand what's going on in our culture.
Yeah.
Too many times, churches or pastors in their sermons fly at 30,000 feet.
Yeah.
And they do a general overview. But what about these young people when they're in their church on Sunday? What are you going to say to them on Monday, Tuesday, when they're in the culture, in their work, in their school? We need to speak, and the Bible speaks to everything that we address: relationships, human sexuality,
That's right.
marriage. All of these different issues are critically important biblical issues. They may be debated by politicians, but it doesn't make them political issues. They're biblical issues.
That's right.
And they're critically important to our relationship with and our understanding of who God is.
Yeah, now more than ever, we have to give a biblical worldview on these issues, and they're moral issues, they're social moral issues, as you alluded to. And you know, time's already running out of time, but I know you have a podcast. You have the Freedom Alive broadcast with Steve that airs on Christian Television Network and other affiliates around the country. What else do you want people to know, takeaway wise? I know you have the great online school.
Well, I would encourage people to go to our website, lc.org, very simple, lc.org, and we have a lot of information there. We have a lot of policy papers there on a wide variety of issues.
Yes.
And learn about Liberty Counsel, and if you know of anything in your community, even though you're not directly involved,
right,
give us an email or call us. Let us know, because if we don't know something is happening, we can't get involved to help. But if we know something is taking place, whether it's in a school, library, park, your place of employment, wherever it may be, get us in the loop, let us know, and we can partner with you to advance religious freedom, life, and family. I
love it, and thank you for doing those advancements. And again, you know, Mat Staver and his team are on the front lines with this. They have experience. If you want to help them go and do what God's called them to do, just check out the website. There's all the resources and how you can get involved. And again, you can also email them. That's probably the best way to do it, to start out, to get a hold of them. If you have a situation in your city, region, wherever you're watching this, maybe you're watching this on a digital media platform, I want to encourage you to like this, share this, tell your in-laws, tell your outlaws for that matter, and have them be engaged. I think now more than ever, our Heavenly Father wants us to impact culture. And what does that mean? To give a biblical worldview in this hour as it relates to wherever your sphere of influence is, wherever God has planted you, whether you're in the marketplace, if you're a pastor, don't shy away. Stand up and be accounted, because we're not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, for it is the power of God and salvation to the Jew and to everyone that believes. And greater work shall we do, because he went to the Father. He's sitting down. He's called on us to answer that call and do those greater works of Jesus in our sphere of influence. You do it. Thank you for doing those greater works, Matt, your wife, Anita, your team, John, all the people. Liberty Action, is that right?
Liberty Counsel Action.
Liberty Counsel Action, that's how you can be engaged. Until next week, same time, same place. Stand up and be counted. Make a difference. You are the light of the world. We'll see you soon across your Christian television network. God bless you.